The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Progressive Insurance with Snapshot. Learn more about Snapshot at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Snapshot not available in California or from all agents.
From Marketplace, I'm Sabri Benishore, in for David Brancaccio. AI chip-making company NVIDIA lost $279 billion in market value yesterday, and its shares kept falling in after-hours trading overnight. The company reportedly received subpoenas from the U.S. Department of Justice yesterday, according to Bloomberg. That's part of a probe into whether NVIDIA violated antitrust laws. But the stock's decline centers more on questions around the future of artificial intelligence itself, as Marketplace's Henry Epp reports.
NVIDIA chips power artificial intelligence systems, which tech companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon have been pouring billions into in the last few years. But the big question for the industry is when or if those investments will ever pay off. And the longer it takes for tech companies to start showing that they've found ways to actually make money with AI, the more investors have gotten wary of buying NVIDIA stock at top prices, even though the chipmaker itself keeps turning healthy profits. NVIDIA's downturn is also tied to broader concerns among investors about the direction of the global economy, especially in the U.S. and China. More uncertainty in the market means some investors have pulled back from riskier sectors like AI. But a bit more insight into the health of the U.S. economy is coming later this week in the August jobs report on Friday. I'm Henry Epp for Marketplace.
You might have heard of food stamps. Well, on Indian reservations, things work a bit differently. Instead of giving out debit cards to use at grocery stores, the U.S. Department of Agriculture sends out actual boxes of groceries every month, and eligible families pick them up from distribution centers. It's called the Food Distribution Program on Indian Reservations, or FDIPR for short, and things there have gone awry. Changes to the program's distribution model have caused a summer of delays and canceled food deliveries. Marketplace's Savannah Marr has more on how tribal governments are filling the gaps.
Back in February, the USDA told tribal leaders it was consolidating the FDIPR supply chain from 2 warehouses serving tribes all over the country to just 1.
We just thought, wow, that's an undertaking like no other.
Mary Green Trottier runs the Spirit Lake Tribe's commodity program. Starting in June, she says deliveries have been arriving weeks late, if at all.
I don't want our program to suffer and see us running out of food. We immediately came up with Plan B.
Sourcing tens of thousands of pounds of food on their own. Easier said than done in rural North Dakota.
There's challenges in rural areas to buying food. That's why FDIPR exists in the first place.
FDIPR has been around since the late 70s. But Carly Griffith-Hotvet, director of the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, says it's an extension of historic ration and commodity programs and part of the federal government's treaty obligations to tribal nations.
And so when this program is derailed, it really impacts the trust responsibility.
Especially with many tribes drawing funds from other programs to ensure families don't go without. That's one temporary solution the USDA has suggested.
They're basically telling tribes that they can rob their own programs to solve USDA's problem.
Kayla Gaybeck-Carroll is an attorney with the Shakopee Minnedowankinton Sioux community. In the next farm bill, she says tribal leaders will be pushing for a regional distribution model. I'm Savannah Marr for Marketplace.
All right, let's do the numbers. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures are all down in the 1 to 0.6% range, with Dow futures down 39 points. The yield on the 10-year Treasury is 3.841%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by JLL, helping unlock possibilities across real estate sectors, from managing 100 million square feet of data centers globally to insights from their 3,000 life sciences team members. Learn more at JLL.com. JLL, see a brighter way.
The U.S. as a whole is producing a record amount of crude oil. The state of California, however, is not. In June, the state produced an average of 285,000 barrels of crude oil a day, according to new data from the Energy Information Administration. That may sound like a lot, but it is the lowest production of any month in government data going back to 1981, and a quarter of what California produced 40 years ago. Marketplace's Daniel Ackerman has more on what's going on.
20 years ago, the U.S. was the world's biggest net importer of oil from abroad. says Mark Finlay, an energy researcher at Rice University. But those days are long gone.
The United States is producing more oil than any country ever in the history of the planet.
The boom has turned the U.S. into a net oil exporter, says Finlay, and it's thanks in large part to one thing.
Shale, in a nutshell.
Shale that can be fracked to get at the oil and gas inside it. Fracking took off around 2010, and it changed where the U.S. was producing its oil. New hotspots included the Bakken oil field in North Dakota and the Permian Basin in Texas and New Mexico. Meanwhile, traditional rigs in California, once a heavyweight producer, have been pumping fewer and fewer barrels since the 1980s.
So those are old reservoirs and they're in decline.
Amy Myers-Jaffe is a professor at NYU who researches energy markets. She says California doesn't have much in the way of potentially lucrative shale deposits, so companies are investing elsewhere.
It's just not an attractive place to drill when there are other places, even in the United States, like Texas and other locations in the Southwest.
Jaffe says California's regulatory environment is also changing. She says historically, the state didn't restrict oil producers all that much, especially when it comes to water pollution caused by drilling.
Surprisingly, California is pretty liberal about what they allow the companies to do with processed water and things like that. And if anything, California needs to tighten that up.
Recently, though, there are signs that's happening, says Dan Kamen, a professor of energy at UC Berkeley.
There's been a series of rulings against the oil industry.
A state law taking effect this year prohibits the drilling of new oil wells within a half-mile of homes or schools due to concerns over respiratory health and air quality. And then there's California's effort to reduce reliance on fossil fuels.
California was the first state to set an electric vehicle mandate. So gas-powered new cars will not be sold in California after 2035.
So with a well-tapped geology below ground and a climate-focused state house above, Kamen doesn't see California's oil industry bouncing back, even as drillers around the country cash in on record production. I'm Daniel Ackerman for Marketplace.
And in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From 8 p.m., American Public Media.